Good morning, everybody, and welcome. It is the 13th of March, 2024, Wednesday. I have been working towards this day since the 8th of December, and it's here, and a cloud has lifted. The clouds have parted, the sun is shining, it's getting warmer, and let me tell you why. Now, back in December the 8th, I was taken into the boss's office and fired. Now, as soon as I got fired, as soon as I knew when he told me I was getting fired, I just thought, oh, this is fucking great. I've been needing this to happen for the last 2 years. I've needed for somebody to tell me to get fired because otherwise I would have stayed there. Anyway, he fired me. I said, well, I'm going nowhere for the next 3 months. I said, you've fired me at such a time where nobody's hiring. You're going to have to give me a bit of grace because he could have fired me and told me to piss off in a month. So he said, right, you can stay till end of March. I said, well, I've built up all these holidays. So as soon as he told me that, I sort of tried to push the envelope a bit, playing the poor card. So I've got mouths to feed. I've got 2 kids at home. So I pushed it a bit. I said, well, I've got all these holidays built up. I don't want to be losing them. So he said, right, you can carry on your holidays and move on. So I've done that. And yesterday, the 12th of March, was the cut-off point to where my holidays can start now. And I don't have to go anywhere until the 31st of March. I'm at home. Now, let me tell you why I got fired. I think it's through no fault of my own. Obviously, you're going to hear my side of the story, but if I was to invite the other people here to tell their side of the story, you would think, why the fuck have you invited these mentally ill people into your studio? And that's not going to happen because my kids live here and I don't want to put them in dangerous situations. Now, working with the mentally ill for 3 years has been quite an eye opener in so many ways. In fact, it's been for 4 years. So for 4 years, I have worked with, let me count, 6 different members of staff. Only one of those people have had both hands on the wheel for an extended period of time. So out of the 6, 5 of them, as we say in Yorkshire, have been right in the head. The other ones, Jesus Christ. Right, so I'm going to start at the beginning. So we'd just come out of COVID. I had the job of my life. I mean, I've had 3 careers in my life, but this career I'm in now is teaching. And the job that I had from 2016 to 2020 was the job I would have stayed at for the rest of my life. Now, unfortunately, like with most things in my life, I seem to have this tractor beam. Now, unlike the Death Star in Star Wars, it doesn't help me out. It attracts shitheads. It's just something I've been born with, and I don't know why. And at this job, it happened to be an Australian. Now, there were many people in the English department at this place, and we were all doing a good job. And we had this one fella who was terrible, and it was an Australian. And I'll tell you his name, balls to it. His name was Scott Naylon, Neylon. You go light him up if you want. I do not give a flying for Tatsu anymore. Now, if I was in a situation where I were the weakest link, I would try and make myself stronger, more of a team member. So what this fella did, rather than make himself look good, it made people look worse. And the thing was, excuse me, the thing was they couldn't fire him because he'd been there that long. So there was no way that he was going to get kicked out of the school. So he made everybody else look bad. So the complaints that he had, he would put in the complaints in my name or other staff members' names. So after 3 years of this, the directors would look at the complaints, see where they had come from. Obviously, it had come from me and some other members of staff, but not really. And I'd been there the least amount of time, so off you go, Darren. So I left there in 2020, just as COVID were kicking in, March 2020. Now, I was extremely pissed off. But I found myself this other direct hire school that was about 40 minutes on my bike away rather than the fucking 5 minutes this place was that I previously worked at. So I were already annoyed. I'd been working with good people apart from this one fella, and it were a good school. So I started at this other place. Now, it started off really well because we were in the middle of COVID. I got emails saying, right, don't come in until the end of April. Fantastic. Don't come in until the end of June. Great. Don't come in until, and I think we started the end of June, early July. So we got in there, but we had to work through August, which were fair enough. We'd had all this time off. So my first day there, I wasn't struck on working at this place. All the people I were working with were females, I were told, and I'd not met them yet. But you know, you go in there and you think, right, I've got to do my best. I'm going to do my best. The moment I went in there, the first day, I was introduced to this very slight woman, and she had the same name as John Lennon's wife, shall we say. And to say that she was nervous would be an understatement. So we were introduced. My name is Yoko. Hello, Darren. Nice to meet you. I'm happy to work with you. We'll be working with you. We'll be working together. And she was speaking so fast. She said, "My name's Yoko. I'm not John Lennon's wife. John Lennon's wife was called Yoko. I'm not his wife." That's how it started. That was our first introduction. And I thought, oh, Jesus Christ, what the fuck is going on? What's going on? So I just went, okay. I shook her hand. And then I was introduced to another woman. And this was the only European in the member of staff, a woman from Norway. Now, you're thinking that this Yoko woman was hard work. Holy shit. We've got another woman who introduces herself who has the same tick. She's got to get as many words as she knows out of her mouth as quickly as humanly possible. Don't really have to be in the correct order to make a sentence. She's not bothered. She does not give a fuck about her grammar. All she needs to do is get the words out as quickly as possible and not let you get a word in edgeways. So when one had sat down, the other one picked off from where she'd left off. And I was just getting this barrage of words and noises and subjects that didn't follow on from one to another. Now, to tie all this up in a neat bow, we had the voice of reason. And the voice of reason was a Japanese lady who was also in the English department staff. A very calm, collected woman. And then you've got these two fucking basket cases. So I sat down and I thought to myself, I am not going to get left alone here. I'm not going to get left alone at all. So we all went upstairs to have a meeting. And the meeting was supposed to be about how to plan the year out for these kids. How to plan the year out, what we were going to do. It soon descended into the woman from Norway talking about her family and about her two other sisters, and going on and doing voices about conversations that she has with this one sister. So she would put on a voice for her sister, and then she'd put on a voice for herself. She wouldn't talk how she would talk. She'd put on a voice for herself. And when she had exhausted all the vocabulary in the conversation, she just started making noises. She started to make fucking noises. And then I said to her, "Rrr, rrr, rrr," and then she came back at me and went, and I went, and then we all went, "Brr, brr, brr, brr." I shit you not. As true as I'm sat here, that happened. And it didn't just happen for the length of time that I've just given you an example for. This went on for a good 5 minutes of noises. Not words, noises. Now, the calm and collective, normal Japanese woman was looking over to me, and because I couldn't see her facial expressions, I could just see her eyes. She sort of gave me what looked like a sympathetic smile. Maybe a, I'm sorry, but this is how it is here. So I had to stop this woman and say, I just said to her, "Are you like this all the time? Because this is going to be hard work." And then that sort of cut to the bone, and she calmed down for a short while. Anyway, we somehow we finished that meeting, and then we paired off. So I went off with John Lennon's wife downstairs to sort out our classes. And you get these people who share every single part of their life very, very quickly. And before we got down to the classroom, which was only on the next floor down, she'd told me that her husband had left her. She was in her mid to late 50s. Her husband's left her. She'd been married for this amount of time. She's got 2 or 3 children. They'd recently left home and gone to university, so she was living by herself. She'd gone from having a family to living by herself in the space of 2 years. She lived next door to her parents who were getting old, and she had to look after them. And I'm thinking, holy fuck, I've been here an hour and a half. Holy fuck, how am I going to get through this? How am I going to get through working with the mentally ill? And how she was going through depression and anxiety. Now, during this time, March 2020, I'd got this frozen shoulder. So I was in fucking agony. Agony. It was before I'd been diagnosed with it, and I just had, and for them of you who've had a frozen shoulder, who are going to get a frozen shoulder in the future, I fucking pity you. I really do. I would not wish a frozen shoulder on anybody, apart from these 2 fucks that I was just being introduced to. Yeah, them 2 can fucking get it. And it turns out later on in the year, so could that other fuck as well, the nice one. Anyway, this is what I would introduce to. I'd gone from the best job I'd ever had in my life to this fucking clown show. So we get into it, we get into teaching, and then it soon panned out that the Norwegian teacher was a fucking bully. A stone cold bully towards the weaker, older divorcee woman. She would not let her lie. She already had a nervous tic, did the Japanese woman. She was depressed. She was anxious. Her husband's left her. She's got an empty house. She was going through a rough time. And Miss Norway, being, well, I don't know what were going on there, but she bullied her to the point where the woman I was working with only used to come to school 50% of the time. She could not face coming in because as soon as she came in, she was getting bullied. So I was doing 50% of the work all by myself. I was doing all of the work 50% of the time, basically. Now, what happened was, because I was new there, all the lesson plans were all open to me. So luckily, I didn't have to prepare anything. It was all there for me to do. But what she did was she would lock the lesson plans for the old Japanese lady. So she would have to come in and make all new lesson plans for herself. So all I used to do was tell the Japanese woman, don't worry, the Norwegian woman's locked you out from the lesson plans. I've got them. Here they are. And that's what I'd do. It was shocking, the bullying that was going on. So that is what I would do. That is what happened. Now, it got so bad for this poor woman. I mean, she was a little bit annoying. The fact that she didn't come into school and she was always nervous. I had to tell her to calm down. She would go on 3 occasions, we'd be going into class and she would be in tears because of the bullying that she was receiving. And I had to say to her, go to the toilet, sort yourself out, and come back when you're ready. Yeah, the Norwegian woman really put her through the ringer. So it got to Christmas time and she couldn't do it. She couldn't stand it anymore. So in December, she just stopped coming in. And then in January, she just left. She couldn't do it anymore. And this was just from the bullying from this Norwegian woman. So for the last semester, from January to the March in 2020, 2021, I was just working solo, which was fine. It was fine. I was left alone to do whatever I had to do. So when a new member of staff was hired, I'd sort of got a gauge of what were coming. And I was thinking to myself, right, I've only been here a year now. If a new member of staff's coming, that bullying is either going towards them or towards me. Now, to cut a long story short, it came towards me. But the caveat here is, and it worked in my favour, is that when you've been raised by an alcoholic, when you've been in the military and you've been to these war zones and you've seen bullying at its fucking most efficient, in Bosnia, in Northern Ireland, places like this, when you've seen bullying at that level, what these fucks are doing is not going to even put a chink in the armour. It's going to be quite laughable. And this new teacher that started, when he first started, it seemed great. He was interested in football. He knew Spanish. I'd lived in Spain, and I thought, right, we're gonna be off to a flyer here. Now, I wasn't allowed to be in the hiring process for some reason. I didn't think that didn't really ring alarm bells for me. It should have done, because it turns out that they hired the total wrong person. Total wrong person. Now, it soon became evident that the bullying was going to be directed towards me around. So you start the school year in April, and we'd not even got out of April, and April is only 2 weeks. It's only 2 weeks. So what happened was, this fella started. He was doing the lesson plans, and I was giving him pointers, and he was taking the pointers and not listening to me. We would then go into the lesson, and you've got to remember, when you are a teacher, if you're working with somebody, the lesson plan is shared. You talk about the lesson plan and talk about how to teach it. None of the lesson plans were shared with me. None of the lesson plans would be shared. I'd asked for them to be shared, they wouldn't be shared. So you would walk into the class, the first slide would come onto the screen, and then he would look to me. And I had no clue. I had no clue. So it was kind of like an improv for me, because I didn't know what the fuck to do. So I'd do this improv class, and then after the first 3 classes, the third class had finished, and I turned to the side, and he was sat in a chair next to the screen with his head in his hands, rocking backwards and forwards. And I thought, oh, this is a sensitive princess. He likes things doing his way, but he won't show me what his way is. So when I try to find what his way is and I don't find it, he gets quite sensitive about it. And I thought, I'm in my 50s. I've lived with people who are arseholes. I now work with people who are arseholes. I've had more or less, my whole childhood were trying to make these people happy. And you can't make these people happy. And fuck it, I'm not doing it anymore. I tried to make my mother happy when she was going through this sort of shit. That didn't work. I lived with a fucking woman for 10 years. Fuck me. No one would make her happy. I thought, I'm not doing it with these fucks. So I just didn't bother. If you want to talk to me, talk to me. You've got to remember, every time I spoke to this fella, it was, are we going to be doing this? Yes. So before I could even get out the full sentence, it was either yes, no. And I thought, you know what? Fuck it. I'm not going to get spoken to like this. So if you want to speak to me, speak to me. But I'm just going to let you do what you want to do and off you go. So it got to the point where, okay, your turn to teach. And I would turn to him and say, well, I don't know what to teach because you've not shown me what to teach. And then the arms would go, oh, I'll do it. When I would teach, it would go, okay, stop. So it would stop me halfway through the class and he'd teach the rest of the class. Oh, fair enough. You want to do that. So slowly he would take off every classroom task, every classroom duty. He'd slowly take it away from me. Now, it started with the marking. We'd do the marking. And then I'd come in, or he'd email me at like 10 o'clock at night. There's trouble with the marking. He'd leave it on the desk. He wouldn't tell me what was wrong with the marking. And then when I didn't know, arms would go in the air and he'd do it himself. But he wouldn't tell me what was wrong. And I thought, it was like working with a menopausal woman. Now, I've only lived with a menopausal woman, not lived with her. I've only seen somebody go through the menopause, and that was my mother. And it was horrific. She had trouble with her nerves. There was something wrong with her in the head. She was an alcoholic and she was going through the menopause. Those four things, right? Negative. Even if you take one of those things out, that's negative. But all four of those things, that's how he was acting. And I thought, I'm not fucking going to even dance to that drum. So I just let him do what he had to do. Now we got to the coming up to the first summer break, and by this time he'd already stopped speaking to me. There were no conversations between us at all. I would send emails that would get ignored. I would ask a question, it would be a one-word answer, not looking up from the computer. Bollocks to you. Fuck you. I've got 2 kids at home who are better behaved than you. I'm not doing it. So it got to a point where we had to teach the sentence, how many? And by this time, I was not asked to do anything in class. So he would go around, and you've got to think on, this was an elementary school, and it was 4th graders. So you are dealing with 8-year-olds, 9-year-olds. And how many? He was going around the class asking young kids, how many boyfriends do you have? How many girlfriends do you have? And then he turned to me when they were not answering him and asked me to ask the question. I just went, no, I'm not asking that question. Now, this made him go bananas. So he would ask the kids, how many boyfriends do you have? To the girls. How many girlfriends do you have? To the boys. And one of the kids, one of the boys, started crying. And I said, you need to stop asking this question. And I said this to him in class. And that sort of emboldened him, and he would do it more and more. Anyway, it got him in the shit. The point where he was tapping the mat in the principal's office. Kids had complained, kids were crying, having to answer this question. So summer break comes, and I'm getting these emails. Oh, I'm in trouble. I'm in trouble. I've been asking these, and I fucking deal with this clown because I were moving house at the time. So I just sent him an email saying, look, you're all right, you'll be fine, deal with it. Anyway, he got away with it. He got away with it. He'd been in, he'd got away with it. So we came back after the summer break, and he were as happy as Larry, the fact that he'd not been sacked. And it kind of got back to how it should be normally when you work in these jobs for about 10 days. For about 10 days. Now, what I've learned over the course of my 3 years of working with this fucking clown, where he liked to take a week off when it got a bit cold, and he liked to take a week off in February. Every February, he'd have a week off. So I had to raise the point to the principal that if he takes time off and I'm coming in the morning, there's no lesson plans ready for me to teach. There's nothing ready. So I went into the principal's office and told this because nothing's shared. Obviously, if I make a lesson plan of my own and I go into his teaching schedule, he gets really antsy about that. So that would put him in a bad mood. So I couldn't teach the material that we use at the school because that would go into his schedule. I wasn't teaching it how he wanted to teach it. I would go in, there'd be nothing to teach if he was sick, so I'd have to pull a lesson plan out of my arse to teach. And I just wanted clarification on what the school wanted me to do. So when I told the principal this, he had no idea. So he invited us both in. This was around December 2021. So we sat down, there's the principal, the vice principal, and a couple of senior members of staff, and the English head from the high school. So we sat down and they said, okay, who wants to go first? Now, I've listened to so many negotiating podcasts on the art of negotiation that I just turned and said, go first. And what came next was 5 minutes of ranting and going on, shouting, ranting, pointing at me in front of the senior members of staff. Now, I just crossed my legs and let him go because I thought, this is fucking great. This just proves my point more than anything else. Now, about 5 minutes into this rant, the vice principal stood up and kind of ushered me to the door. And I said, no, I'm fine. And then he went, no, you can go. So I wasn't even allowed to put my side of the story out there. But I wasn't bothered because it were plain to see what were going on, which were great. So I was told not to worry. Next year will be fine. So we go back in there in January. I'd already signed a new contract for next year, and it were pretty much back to normal. In fact, more over the 3 months of the third semester of 2021, everything was taken away. So I wasn't speaking in class, I wasn't doing any marking, down to handing out photocopies. That was taken away from me. So from April 2021 to March 2024, I have been paid to do nothing. How fantastic is that? They have been giving me £50,000 sterling to go into school every day at 8:20 stand at the back of the class for 4 classes a day and leave the school at 4 o'clock. They have paid me £50,000 sterling. To end on this, I just want to leave you with a story, and it's the last Norway story. And it just sums her up completely. Now, this was the first week of when I started there. And these fucking Gen Zers or Gen Xers, knobheads, it sums them up. It sums them up. She had got rid of a woman who was depressed and anxious while constantly talking about her depression and anxiety. She would go on and go on about her depression and anxiety. And I would give her no sympathy because I saw how she bullied somebody who had more depression and more anxiety than her. So fuck off. Fuck off. Why was she depressed and anxious? Because she'd watched some videos from Faces of Death. She had no childhood trauma. She'd just watched a few dodgy stuff on internet. That were it. So fuck off. I've been in war zones. I've been in disaster zones. I can deal with mine. You've watched fucking videos. Fuck off. So I was reading this story about this fella that had got into trouble because he had an affair at work. And this was in passing. I'd read this news story and it were on my video, on my computer screen. And I just said, look, all these women they are in the world. And he chooses a woman at work to have an affair with. Why would you do that? Now, expecting, this is what I would expect. And is it, I don't know, is it me? Is it fucking me? I expected, oh yeah, all the women. And she just turned to me and she said, just so you know, nothing like that is going to happen at this school. Just so you know. And I was quite taken aback at that. And not thinking about what I should say. I mean, for them of you that know me, I've never been happy really. You know, alcoholic mother. I then joined the military, which was a mistake because I'm a lone wolf. I'm not really a team player. I then lived with a fucking woman who were just fucking hard work. Hard work. So we're never happy. I met my wife. We've got 2 kids, and now we're having these feelings around fucking 39, 40, 41 that I'd never had before in my life. And one day I was thinking, fucking, I think this is happiness. I think this is happiness. So, and I've experienced that for past 14 years. And it's fucking great. It still feels like a new feeling because I'd never had it before. So I just turned to her. I said, look, because this were after 2 or 3 weeks of this fucking verbal diarrhea from this clown. I turned to her. I said, look, I was raised by an alcoholic. I joined the military. I went to war zones. I've just all sorts of bullshit that I've had to deal with in my life. I live with a woman who were a fucking knobhead. I said, I am now happy, and I've been happy for the best part over a decade now. If you think for one moment that I am going to risk all that fucking happiness that I've never had before on a fucking 2, 3 at best, you are sadly mistaken. So yes, it is not going to happen here. And yes, it's certainly not going to happen with you. So you can get that thought out of your head. She closed the lid on a computer. She picked up the tissues at the side of her. She stood up and she left. Hopefully to have a fucking cry with her fucking 2 face. I'm rid of all that today. The 13th of March is the first full day I don't have to deal with any of that shit anymore. The smile is back. The colours in my cheeks. I'm feeling the weight is lifted off my shoulders. And you know what? The Yorkshireman in me, I'm thinking I might lose this fucking edge now. Because I start a new job in April, and the people that interviewed me spoke more words to me in a 40-minute interview than have been spoken to me by the rest of the English department in the last 3 years. So I'm already sensing this job's going to be better than the last one. Because even if this next job is shit, it will be vast. It will be the best job I've had in the last 4 years. I mean, I can't see it, but it's this. They do look like a professional outfit. But here is going on to better things. Here is fucking getting the positive back. I cannot begin to tell you how happy I am. I ain't got that knot in my stomach anymore that I have to go and see these fucks today or ever again for that matter. And that is worth its weight in gold. I'm getting slightly less money, but I'm working 3 days a week. And I don't care because I'll be able to build that. I've already built up that extra money because I'm working online in the mornings before I even start work. So I don't even have to worry about that anymore. So I'm going to have the same amount of money coming in, and I've got 2 days off. 2 days off from these fucks. How great is that? But I might lose my edge. I might lose that aggression. I might lose that moaning part of my personality, which is a good thing for the family, but not so good for the podcast. So thank you for listening. Thank you for sticking by me these last 4 years when I've had to deal with these fucks. I think my podcasts might get a more flowery feel to them, which I hope you keep listening to. But that's that, and that's that. Thanks for listening. Happiness is back in all parts of my life. I'll see you next time. Adios.